and there are plenty of 75-year-olds vigorously pursuing their careers and other pursuits. I would almost leave it at that, Your Honors, but there is, when I came in here, I was encouraged by all these motorcyclists here in the vest. As you know, well, you may not know, I'm a member of the Blue Knights Maryland 1 chapter law enforcement motorcycle club of the United States, which happens to be the largest motorcycle club in the world, one of them, and we have 19,000 members in 70-some different countries, a lot of chapters. And I don't know what they're here for exactly, but I want you to give them the benefit of the doubt, because whatever they're subjected to, I am too also subjected to. So at 75, it's time to ride. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judge.
And I don't mean out into the sunset.
I understand. Thank you, Judge.
Senator Raskin, thank you for the bill. I'm in complete agreement. I did have one question. I've just been looking through the bill, but what if I've heard that some cops will stop people based on like if they think they're part of a gang, and that's not just for motorcycles; it's for other, stopping people walking down the street that have certain types of gang symbols. Of course, the problem with that is somebody's got a red bandana doesn't mean they're in a gang or whatever. But I mean, what does this bill speak to? Is there a way for law enforcement if they have a certain amount of reasonable suspicion and someone's wearing a gang patch? I mean, what's this bill do on that?
That's an excellent question, Senator. So reasonable suspicion applies to conduct, to criminal conduct.
Right.
We have reasonable suspicion somebody robbed a bank. We have reasonable suspicion somebody's speeding. But reasonable suspicion that somebody belongs to a gang is actually not reasonable suspicion.
Because they haven't broken the law technically by belonging to a gang.
The First Amendment protects the right to belong to different kinds of associations, right?
Right.
We heard some gruesome testimony in this committee the other day related to different churches, right? Mm-hmm. And there were allegations these churches were systematically harboring known child abusers for decades.
Right.
Would we say that somebody who is a member of that church, who is wearing, whatever the habit of that church is, whatever the dress of the church is, could be stopped on the theory that they're associated with an entity that has been linked to a pattern of criminality?
So your bill does not address that, then? It leaves that...
I think the Constitution addresses it. I mean, there are these cases relating to the Communist Party and the Smith Act in the 1950s saying the government could not criminalize the act of belonging to the Communist Party.
Right.
If a communist commits espionage or whatever, then you've got reasonable suspicion and probable cause. But in America, you can belong to the groups and associations you want under the First Amendment.
That's very good. I knew that would be brought up by opposition, so I thought maybe we could discuss it now.
Yeah. Now, I mean, the only ambiguity there is if there are reports that a particular gang, corporation, church, whatever, just committed an offense.
In that case, this bill wouldn't keep the police from fully looking for that and enforcing that. Okay, great.
David Devereaux.
Hi, Mr. Chair, Committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. My name is David Devereaux. I represent the Confederation of Clubs and the U.S. Defenders, and I suppose of particular relevance is I'm also held responsible for spearheading the effort that ultimately resulted in the first law addressing motorcycle profiling in America, passed in Washington State in 2011. Incidentally, it was unanimously passed by our legislature. I believe that the pattern of evidence that exists in Maryland demonstrate the same problem is occurring here, and I believe that the experience that we had, which is modeled by this legislation, provides not only a highly effective solution, but a cost-beneficial solution, and also one that hasn't affected law enforcement's ability to do their job. I think it's been well established the process of profiling is illegal. It violates the First Amendment. It violates the 14th Amendment. Of particular concern, independent of constitutional issues, are the economic impacts. Law enforcement says, sue us. That's massive civil liabilities that are exposed to the state because of this process, which we already know is occurring, independent of the fact that I think there's an essential question of the gross mismanagement of resources when a massive budget is used for basically a public campaign of harassment. I think the two important things to establish to necessitate this bill are, first, is motorcycle profiling occurring in Maryland, and second, is there a cost-efficient solution? I think the answer to both those questions is an unequivocal yes. In terms of the pattern of profiling, hundreds of motorcycle profiling statements have recently been signed by individuals who are residents and ride motorcycles in the state of Maryland. These range from members of Christian organizations to members of veteran organizations, and they're oftentimes on the side of the road based on a pretext of a traffic infraction for the real reason of wanting to investigate their associations based on the patches that are on their back. An excellent example is the blessing of bikes, and has been discussed in length. I think what's also important to realize is that many of these individuals are held at the end of an automatic weapon. It's not just simply presence, but these are felony stops that are being conducted based on traffic infractions. It's not an isolated example. Look at Ocean City in 2014. There's a number of incidents that demonstrate that this is an irrefutable process. Individual Bill Cates was pulled over by 4 officers, including a gang task force officer, for the purpose of issuing a helmet warning. He was held for over half an hour and constantly interrogated about his group membership, organizational affiliations, and what that meant. Once the officers realized that they were being videotaped by a member of the motorcycle community, they immediately disengaged, gave him the warning, and got out of the scene as quickly as they could. I believe it's because they realized what they were doing was wrong. And incidentally, that involved the Maryland State Police as well. Incident the next day at Ocean City. 44 vehicles were used to pull over a pack of 22 motorcycles based on simple traffic infractions, and they were held for well over half an hour, and there was no criminal activity, and it's all based on the biker stereotype that is being applied overly broad. You can't make a generalized presupposition about thousands of people based on the actions of a few unless you have specific and a particularized interest. I think that the pattern of evidence in Maryland is very irrefutable. So now the question has to turn to, is there an economic and efficient solution? And I think that the model of this bill, which models Washington State, proves that it has. Since we passed this bill in 2011, motorcycle profiling incidents from a simple policy statement and training have been reduced by over 90% in the state of Washington. In addition to that, it has had zero fiscal impact, which is confirmed by the fiscal note attached to this bill. Moreover, and most importantly, it has not affected law enforcement's ability to do their job. In fact, we passed this bill unanimously. 3 of the sponsors on this bill were active and former law enforcement because they understood that a primary responsibility of the legislature is to manage the relationship between law enforcement and the community. Look what happens when the relationship between law enforcement and the community breaks down. A cursory glance of what's happened in society around America in the last few years should demonstrate that it's an extremely important issue. Remember, one of the things that made this law work in Washington is that we already had an integrated system of profiling policies and training which allow this policy to easily be integrated into the status quo. I think there's no other choice but to affirm SB 727.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Appreciate it.
All right. Jeff Burns.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for allowing me to speak to you all. My name is Jeff Burns. I'm a motorcycle rights advocate from Washington State. I also represent the U.S. Defenders nationally. I'm here today in support of this legislation and to let you know that motorcycle profiling legislation is effective in stopping motorcycle profiling. It reduces law enforcement's exposure to motorcycle profiling related lawsuits, and this legislation will virtually cost the taxpayers and law enforcement absolutely nothing. During our push for motorcycle profiling legislation in Washington State, one of my primary duties was to build our pattern of evidence through the use of public records requests to obtain law enforcement records such as dash cam video, radio traffic, CAD reports, and police reports. We used these documents to evidence the profiling of motorcyclists by law enforcement because it's most effective to use their own evidence against them. As a motorcyclist was profiled in Washington State, I would get a call and they would request that I would conduct a public disclosure request on for the records involved in their stops. Prior to our profiling law passing in Washington State, I handled approximately 20 to 25 of these requests per month. Since our profiling law has taken effect, I handle approximately 1 request per year. So it's clearly effective. In the state of Maryland, the motorcycle community has had a problem developing an accurate pattern of evidence because agencies like the Ocean City Police Department and the Calvert County Sheriff's Office use the Maryland Public Information Act and the investigation exclusion to refuse releasing records that evidence motorcycle profiling. Over the last 5 years, I've traveled extensively throughout the United States and spoken to literally tens of thousands of motorcyclists regarding motorcycle profiling. And what I can tell you is, with the exception of Hawaii, motorcycle profiling is a national epidemic and it's a national problem. We ride motorcycles for the sense of freedom they give us, but it's troubling when every time you gear up to ride, you have to be worried about being pulled over simply for the way you're dressed. But this is an unfortunate reality for motorcyclists across America and right here in Maryland, which is why this legislation is necessary. I hope that you'll support this bill so that motorcyclists in Maryland can ride free like we do in Washington State. And I'd like to thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Thanks so much for your testimony. Did you come out just to testify here?
Yes, sir.
How did you get here?
I flew.
Oh, okay. Welcome to Maryland. Thanks for being here.
You. All right, turning to the opposition, Mike Young. Okay. Well, that concludes the testimony on Senate Bill 727. We now turn to Senate Bill 721. Senator Reedy.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here, by the way, and we all appreciate the condensing the testimony into a couple panels. So welcome to Annapolis, and thank you for your participation today. Thank you.